you've spent your entire life wondering why you feel everything more deeply than everyone around you. Stop scrolling for a moment, because this isn't a personality trait. It may be the clearest sign that your twin flame connection is already awakening. What if every emotion you've tried to suppress, every sleepless night, every unexplained wave of sadness that appeared out of nowhere, wasn't actually yours alone? Very few people are ready to hear this, but when two souls are destined to reunite, one of them often begins carrying emotional frequencies long before the physical meeting ever happens. They become unusually sensitive to people, places, dreams, even energies no one else notices. You've probably been called too emotional, too sensitive, or too intense. Maybe you've spent years believing something was wrong with you. But what if your sensitivity isn't your weakness? What if it's the spiritual language your soul was designed to understand? Because right now, something invisible may already be preparing you for the person who will completely change your life. And if you ignore these signs, you may misunderstand the very awakening you've been praying for. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt that something was wrong, even though everyone around you was smiling? Have you ever met someone for only a few minutes, yet somehow knew they were carrying unbearable pain? Or perhaps you found yourself overwhelmed by emotions that seemed to arrive without warning, waves of sadness, longing, or joy so powerful that you couldn't explain them, no matter how hard you tried. If that sounds familiar, then listen carefully, because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you understand yourself. Most people believe emotional sensitivity is a weakness. They tell you to toughen up. They say you're overthinking, overreacting, or taking things too personally. Maybe you've heard those words your entire life. You're too emotional. You need thicker skin. Stop feeling everything so deeply. Eventually, you started believing them. You began wondering whether something inside you was broken. You tried to hide your emotions. You forced yourself to smile when your heart was heavy. You pretended not to notice the tension everyone else ignored. You convinced yourself that if you could just become a little less sensitive, life would finally become easier. But no matter how hard you tried, it never worked. Because your sensitivity wasn't something you developed. It was something you brought with you. And if you're one of the souls meant to experience a twin flame connection, that sensitivity may be far more than an emotional trait. It may be one of the earliest signs that your soul has already begun remembering what your mind has forgotten. Think about that for a moment. What if the very thing you've spent years trying to suppress? That is actually the compass guiding you toward your destiny. Most people experience life through events. Chosen souls experience life through energy. Before a conversation even begins, you can feel whether someone is genuine. Before someone admits they're hurting, you somehow already know. Sometimes you absorb the atmosphere of an entire room without anyone speaking a single word. It feels exhausting, confusing, even isolating. Because while everyone else seems capable of moving through life without being affected by invisible emotional currents, you can't simply switch yours off. And perhaps you've wondered why. Science would call this heightened empathy. Psychology might describe it as emotional sensitivity. But many spiritual traditions suggest something deeper. They propose that certain souls arrive carrying a naturally expanded awareness, an ability to perceive subtle emotional frequencies that others overlook completely. Whether you interpret that spiritually, psychologically, or symbolically, the experience can feel remarkably similar. It's as though your inner world is tuned to a frequency that few people can hear. Imagine standing beside a radio. Most people hear one station. You hear 10. Some are beautiful. Some are painful. Some belong to you. Some don't. Without realizing it, you've spent years trying to separate one signal from another. No wonder you're exhausted. But here's where the mystery becomes even more fascinating. Many people report that long before meeting someone who profoundly changes their life, their emotional awareness becomes even stronger. Old memories suddenly surface. Dreams become unusually vivid. Random songs seem to carry personal messages. Certain places begin feeling strangely familiar. Coincidences multiply. Time itself starts behaving differently. Days feel longer. Moments feel heavier. Your intuition becomes impossible to ignore. Could all of this simply be chance? Maybe. Or maybe your inner world is preparing for a transformation your conscious mind cannot yet see. Imagine climbing a mountain before sunrise. At first, everything is dark. You don't know why you're climbing. You can't even see the summit. You simply feel compelled to keep moving. Then little by little, the horizon begins to glow. Nothing outside has fully changed yet. But everything inside you knows morning is coming. That is what many people describe before a profound soul connection enters their lives. Not certainty. Preparation. And preparation rarely feels comfortable. Because before something new can emerge, something old usually has to fall away. Perhaps you've noticed friendships fading without explanation. Relationships ending despite your best efforts. Career paths suddenly losing meaning. Dreams that once motivated you no longer feel alive. It's tempting to see these experiences as failures. But what if they're actually signs of alignment? Imagine trying to fill a cup that's already overflowing. No matter how much fresh water you pour in, it has nowhere to go. Sometimes life empties the cup before offering something greater. The emptying hurts, but it creates space. Space is uncomfortable. Silence is uncomfortable. Waiting is uncomfortable. Yet every meaningful transformation begins there. This is why so many spiritually awakening individuals describe a season where everything familiar begins disappearing at once. Not because life is punishing them, but because life is rearranging itself. The problem is, most people mistake preparation for abandonment. They believe the silence means they've been forgotten. The delays convince them they're unworthy. The loneliness whispers that they'll always be alone. And that belief becomes heavier than the actual circumstances. But what if the silence has never been empty? What if it's been full of invisible movement? Think about a seed buried beneath the soil. From the outside, nothing appears to happen. Days pass. Weeks pass. The ground looks exactly the same. Anyone watching might conclude that the seed has failed. Yet beneath the surface, an extraordinary transformation is already underway. Roots form long before leaves appear. Strength develops long before beauty becomes visible. Perhaps your own life has been unfolding in exactly the same way. Perhaps the deepest changes have been happening where no one, including you, could see them. This is especially difficult for highly sensitive souls, because you don't merely experience external events. You feel anticipation, possibility, absence, potential. You sense beginnings before they become visible, and endings before anyone else notices. That gift can feel like a burden, especially when nobody around you understands it. Maybe you've even questioned your sanity. Why did that stranger feel strangely familiar? Why did that dream stay with you for years? Why does one song make you cry every single time? Why can you never explain what you feel using ordinary words? Perhaps because what you're experiencing was never meant to fit ordinary explanations. Not every mystery demands immediate certainty. Some invite reflection instead. Whether you see these moments as spiritual signs, deep intuition, or the remarkable sensitivity of the human heart, they deserve curiosity rather than shame. Because one truth remains undeniable. Your emotions have been trying to tell you something. Not to make you weaker, but to wake you up. The world often teaches you to silence your feelings. Your soul may be asking you to finally listen to them. And perhaps, just perhaps, the intensity you've carried your entire life isn't evidence that you've been broken. It's evidence that you've been preparing. Preparing for a connection unlike any you've ever known. Preparing for a reunion your soul has recognized long before your mind could understand it. Preparing for the moment when every confusing chapter of your life suddenly begins to make sense. Because in the next chapter, we'll explore why so many deeply sensitive people feel like strangers in their own families, and why that painful loneliness may have been shaping them for something far greater than they ever imagined. Have you ever felt like you were born into the wrong family? Not because they were necessarily cruel. Not because they didn't provide for you. but because somehow they never really saw you. They saw your behavior. They judged your reactions. They tried to correct your emotions. But they never understood the invisible world you were living inside. Perhaps as a child, you cried over things that seemed insignificant to everyone else. A harsh tone of voice. An argument between adults. The loneliness in another child's eyes. The sadness hidden behind your mother's smile. While other children quickly returned to playing, you carried those feelings for days. Sometimes weeks. You weren't simply witnessing emotions. You were absorbing them. Yet instead of asking why you experienced life this way, many people around you tried to change you. Stop being so dramatic. You worry too much. You're imagining things. You need to be stronger. Little by little, those words became part of your inner dialogue. Eventually, you stopped trusting your own instincts. You questioned your perceptions. You wondered if perhaps everyone else was right. Maybe you really were too sensitive. Maybe you really did make everything more complicated than it needed to be. But here's the question very few people ever ask. What if you weren't too much? What if everyone around you simply wasn't able to perceive what you naturally could? Imagine placing someone with extraordinary hearing into the middle of a noisy city. They would hear distant conversations, the rustling of leaves, electrical currents humming behind walls, sounds others never notice. Would that mean their hearing is broken? Or would it simply mean their senses operate differently? Emotional sensitivity works much the same way. Some people move through life noticing only what is spoken. Others notice what remains unsaid. A slight hesitation. Eyes that don't match a smile. Silence after a difficult question. The heaviness someone carries despite insisting they're fine. You've probably experienced moments when someone insisted everything was okay. Yet every part of you knew they were hurting. Days later, the truth finally emerged. And people asked, "How did you know?" You couldn't explain it. You just knew. Experiences like these often become confusing during childhood because children naturally assume everyone experiences reality the same way they do. It isn't until much later that they realize their emotional world operates differently. That realization can be incredibly lonely, especially when the people you love most dismiss your experiences. Maybe your family celebrated logic while quietly rejecting emotion. Perhaps vulnerability was mistaken for weakness. Maybe expressing sadness earned criticism instead of comfort. Or perhaps everyone was carrying wounds they had never healed themselves. People can only validate emotions they have learned to recognize within their own lives. If someone has spent decades suppressing their own pain, your openness may unintentionally remind them of everything they've buried. Without realizing it, they ask you to bury your feelings too. Not because they don't love you, but because your honesty makes them uncomfortable. This is one of the great paradoxes of deeply sensitive souls. The very quality that allows them to offer profound compassion often attracts misunderstanding. You become the listener, the healer, the safe place. Friends tell you secrets they've never shared with anyone else. Strangers open up within minutes of meeting you. Coworkers confess their struggles. Family members lean on your emotional strength whenever they fall apart. But when you need someone, the room becomes strangely quiet. Have you noticed that? How often have you carried everyone else's burdens while silently carrying your own? You became the strong one, the dependable one, the one who always understood. Yet inside, you secretly wondered why no one seemed capable of understanding you. That loneliness cuts deeper than physical isolation, because it's possible to be surrounded by people and still feel invisible. In fact, many sensitive people describe exactly that feeling. They attend family gatherings, celebrate birthdays, laugh with friends, go to work, build careers. Yet underneath every conversation exists the same silent question. Does anyone actually know who I am? Sometimes the answer feels like no. And that answer hurts. Not because you're seeking attention, but because every human soul longs to be recognized. Not admired. Recognized. There is a profound difference. Recognition says, I see who you truly are. Many people receive admiration. Very few receive recognition. If you've spent years feeling emotionally unseen, it's natural to wonder whether genuine understanding even exists. Some eventually stop searching altogether. They lower their expectations. They become emotionally independent. They tell themselves, I don't need anyone. But often, that statement hides a deeper truth. I stopped expecting anyone to understand me. There is wisdom in becoming self-reliant. But there is also sadness when self-protection becomes emotional isolation. Highly sensitive people often become experts at appearing fine. You've probably mastered that skill yourself. You smile. You work. You accomplish goals. You encourage others. Meanwhile, entire emotional storms unfold beneath the surface where no one can see them. You don't hide your feelings because you're dishonest. You hide them because experience has taught you that very few people know what to do with them. So you become quieter, more selective, more cautious about revealing your heart. Eventually, people begin describing you as mysterious, reserved, hard to read. Ironically, they have no idea that beneath your calm exterior lives someone who feels almost everything. Sometimes all at once. Imagine carrying a glass filled to the very edge. Every conversation adds another drop. Every disappointment. Every act of kindness. Every goodbye. Every memory. Every hope. Eventually the glass overflows. Then people ask, why are you reacting so strongly? They never saw the thousands of drops that came before. They only noticed the final one. This is why sensitive souls often surprise others with emotional intensity. The reaction isn't about one moment. It's about years of accumulated feeling. Years of carrying invisible weight. Years of pretending everything was manageable. Then one ordinary event opens the floodgates. Suddenly tears appear. Not because of today, but because today touched every yesterday you never fully healed. This is where many spiritual seekers begin asking deeper questions. Why was I made this way? Why do I feel different from almost everyone I know? Why do I long for connections that seem impossible to find? While there are many ways to answer those questions, one perspective suggests something remarkable. Perhaps your loneliness has never been evidence that you don't belong. Perhaps it has been preventing you from settling for relationships that never truly matched your soul. Think about it. If you had always felt completely understood by everyone around you, would you ever have searched for something deeper? Would you have questioned life? Developed your intuition? Learned discernment? Discovered your inner strength? Sometimes the very ache we wish would disappear becomes the force that transforms us. The desert teaches lessons the garden never could. Silence develops hearing. Solitude develops awareness. Longing develops wisdom. None of those experiences are pleasant while you're living through them. Yet looking back, many people realize they would never have become who they are without them. Perhaps your journey has been unfolding the same way. Perhaps every misunderstanding sharpened your ability to understand yourself. Perhaps every betrayal taught you the value of authenticity. Perhaps every season of loneliness brought you closer to the relationship you were truly seeking, not only with another soul, but with your own. Because before two deeply connected souls can recognize each other, each must first learn to recognize themselves. That process is rarely comfortable. It often feels like standing alone while everyone else seems to move effortlessly through life. But appearances can be deceptive. Many people who seem emotionally stable have simply become emotionally numb. You, on the other hand, never lost your capacity to feel. And although that gift has brought pain, it has also preserved something incredibly precious. Your heart remained alive. It still responds to beauty, to kindness, to truth, to love, even after disappointment. That isn't weakness. That is extraordinary resilience. Because the greatest miracle isn't avoiding heartbreak. The greatest miracle is remaining capable of loving after you've experienced it. Maybe that has been your real strength all along. Not your ability to endure pain, but your refusal to let pain transform you into someone incapable of compassion. And if that is true, then perhaps all those years of feeling different were never separating you from your destiny. Perhaps they were quietly guiding you toward it. Because in the next chapter, we'll uncover one of the greatest mysteries of the twin flame journey. Why every relationship that seemed to fall apart may have been clearing the path for the one connection your soul has been preparing for all along. Have you ever looked back at your life and wondered why nothing seemed to work the way you had planned? The relationship you were certain would last forever suddenly ended. The friendship you trusted without question quietly disappeared. The career you spent years building no longer fulfilled you. The dreams that once gave you purpose somehow lost their meaning. At first, each ending felt like proof that life was moving against you. You asked questions that never seemed to receive answers. Why does everyone eventually leave? Why do I keep starting over? What am I doing wrong? Maybe you've replayed those questions hundreds of times, searching for one mistake, one decision, one moment that could explain why your life unfolded differently than you expected. But what if you've been asking the wrong question all along? Instead of asking, why did everything fall apart? What if the better question is, what was life making room for? There is an old image that appears in many spiritual traditions. A sculptor stands before an enormous block of marble. To everyone else, it is simply stone. Heavy, ordinary, lifeless. But the sculptor sees something no one else can see. A masterpiece already hidden inside. The sculptor does not create the statue by adding something. The sculptor creates it by removing everything that doesn't belong. Each strike of the chisel looks destructive. Pieces fall away. Dust fills the air. From the outside, it appears as though the marble is being damaged. Yet every fragment that breaks away reveals more of the beauty that was always waiting beneath the surface. Perhaps your own life has unfolded in a similar way. Perhaps what felt like loss was actually removal. Not because life wanted to punish you, but because certain chapters could not accompany you into the next season of your journey. Think about the people you've loved. Not everyone who entered your life was meant to remain there forever. Some arrived to teach you confidence. Others revealed your fears. Some reflected your deepest wounds. Others showed you the parts of yourself you had forgotten. At the time, each relationship felt permanent. Yet looking back now, can you see how each one transformed you? Maybe the person who broke your heart also awakened your self-worth. Maybe the friendship that ended taught you the importance of healthy boundaries. Maybe the opportunity you lost redirected you toward a path you would never have discovered otherwise. Pain rarely introduces itself as a teacher. It usually arrives disguised as chaos. Only much later do we recognize its lessons. This is especially true for those who believe they are walking a twin flame path. Many describe a long period where life seems to dismantle everything familiar before introducing profound transformation. Old identities dissolve. Comfort zones disappear. Certainties vanish. It feels as though the ground beneath your feet has become unstable. Naturally, your first instinct is to rebuild what was lost. To fix the relationship. To chase the opportunity. To recreate the life you once knew. But what if the old foundation was never strong enough to support who you were becoming? Imagine trying to build a lighthouse on shifting sand. No matter how beautiful the structure becomes, the first great storm will eventually bring it down. Before something lasting can be built, the foundation must become solid. Foundations are rarely exciting. They are invisible, messy, slow. Most people admire the finished lighthouse. Very few appreciate the months spent strengthening what no one will ever see. Your spiritual life often unfolds the same way. Long before visible blessings appear, invisible foundations are being formed. And foundations require patience. This may explain why so many people experience delays before life-changing relationships enter their lives. Not because they are forgotten, not because they are unworthy, but because preparation often takes longer than expectation is willing to wait. Perhaps you've noticed this pattern already. Every time you thought, "This is finally the one," something unexpected happened. Plans changed. Distance appeared. Communication faded. Timing failed. It seemed almost cruel, as though the universe kept placing hope within reach, only to pull it away again. If you've experienced that, you know how exhausting it can become. Eventually, hope itself begins to feel dangerous. You stop expecting good things because disappointment has become familiar. You convince yourself that protecting your heart is safer than believing again. Yet sometimes protection quietly becomes another prison. You build emotional walls so carefully that even love struggles to find its way inside. This is one of the great paradoxes of healing. The same walls that keep pain out can also keep connection out. Many people spend years asking life to send them extraordinary love while unconsciously defending themselves against receiving it. Not because they don't want love, but because they've learned that attachment often brings loss. Healing begins when that pattern becomes visible. It isn't about pretending the past never happened. It isn't about forcing yourself to trust blindly. It's about realizing that yesterday's wounds don't have to become tomorrow's identity. Consider a forest after a wildfire. For months, everything appears ruined. Blackened trees, silent ground, ash stretching farther than the eye can see. Anyone visiting that forest might believe life has disappeared forever. But beneath the surface, something remarkable is already happening. Certain seeds only open after intense heat. The very fire that appeared to destroy the forest also awakened new life hidden deep within the soil. Without the fire, those seeds might never have grown. Your life may contain similar moments. Experiences that felt unbearable while you lived through them. Experiences you would never willingly repeat. And yet, those same moments awakened strengths you never knew existed. Perhaps betrayal taught you discernment. Perhaps loneliness taught you self-respect. Perhaps grief taught you compassion. Perhaps uncertainty taught you faith. Transformation rarely asks for permission. It simply begins. And often, we recognize it only after we've become someone new. Now imagine meeting someone capable of seeing the person you've become. Not the version of you that existed years ago, but the one shaped by every lesson, every setback, and every quiet act of courage. Would you have recognized that connection if it had appeared before your own growth? Or would fear have caused you to walk away? That possibility invites a profound reflection. Maybe divine timing is not primarily about waiting for another person. Maybe it's about becoming capable of recognizing and sustaining the kind of connection your heart truly longs for. Whether you understand the twin flame journey as a literal spiritual reunion or as a symbolic path of deep personal transformation, one principle remains surprisingly consistent. The outer relationship often reflects the inner one. If fear governs your inner world, fear eventually shapes your relationships. If shame defines your identity, shame quietly influences the people you choose. If self-worth begins to heal, entirely different relationships become possible. This is why many people notice that as they change internally, the people entering their lives begin changing as well. Life starts reflecting a different frequency. Not through magic, but through transformation. You notice red flags sooner. You stop chasing unavailable people. You become comfortable walking away from situations that once would have consumed years of your life. You no longer confuse intensity with compatibility. You no longer mistake inconsistency for mystery. You no longer believe love requires constant suffering. That change is extraordinary, because it means your soul is no longer searching from a place of emptiness. It is beginning to choose from a place of wholeness. And perhaps that has been the hidden purpose of every painful ending. Not to convince you that love is impossible, but to teach you the difference between attachment and alignment. Attachment says, "I need this person to complete me." Alignment whispers, "I have become someone who can finally receive what is truly meant for me." There is enormous freedom in that realization. It shifts your attention away from chasing and toward becoming. away from desperation and toward trust, away from fear and toward quiet confidence. Then something beautiful begins to happen. You stop measuring your life by what has not yet arrived. Instead, you begin noticing how much has already changed within you. The same challenges no longer break you. The same disappointments no longer define you. The same loneliness no longer feels permanent. You realize that while you were waiting for your future was patiently shaping you. Maybe the delays were never empty. Maybe every closed door protected you from walking through the wrong one. Maybe every goodbye quietly redirected your steps. Maybe every heartbreak removed another layer of fear. And maybe, just maybe, the connection you've been longing for has never depended solely on finding the right person. Perhaps it has always depended on becoming the version of yourself capable of recognizing, receiving, and sustaining that connection when the moment finally arrives. Because the greatest revelation of the twin flame journey isn't simply that two souls may meet. It's that the path leading to that meeting transforms both souls long before they ever stand face to face. So if you're standing in a season where life still feels uncertain, if doors continue closing, if plans continue changing, if your heart still wonders whether all of this has meaning, remember the sculptor. Remember the lighthouse. Remember the forest after the fire. The masterpiece is revealed through removal. The strongest foundation is built before the tower rises. The richest new growth often begins beneath the ashes. And perhaps your own story is unfolding in exactly the same way. Not as a series of meaningless endings, but as a quiet, patient preparation for the chapter your soul has been moving toward all along. What if the greatest obstacle between you and the life you've been praying for, that isn't distance, isn't timing, isn't another person? What if it's the belief that you must keep chasing what is already making its way toward you? For so long, you've been searching for answers outside yourself, searching for signs, searching for confirmation, searching for the one message, the one dream, the one coincidence that will finally tell you everything is going to be okay. Maybe you've watched countless videos hoping someone could explain what your heart has been feeling. Maybe you've stayed awake at night wondering whether your twin flame is thinking about you at the exact same moment. Maybe you've replayed old conversations, read hidden meanings into silence, questioned every synchronicity, questioned every delay, questioned yourself. And after all of that searching, you may have overlooked the most important message of all. Your journey was never designed to teach you how to chase. It was designed to teach you how to trust. There is a profound difference. Chasing begins with fear. Trust begins with peace. Chasing whispers, "If I don't hold everything together, I'll lose what is meant for me." Trust quietly replies, "What is truly aligned with my soul cannot be stolen by time." Think about how nature works. The sun never chases the flowers. Yet every morning, they turn toward its light. The ocean never runs after the moon. Yet its tides rise and fall in perfect rhythm. The seasons never force one another to arrive. Winter does not compete with spring. Autumn does not fear summer. Each season appears exactly when it is ready. Not too early. Not too late. Imagine if nature lived the way many of us do. Imagine flowers trying to bloom in the middle of winter because they were afraid spring would never come. Imagine rivers refusing to flow because they could not see the ocean yet. It sounds impossible. And yet, many people spend years resisting the natural rhythm of their own lives. They mistake waiting for failure, silence for rejection, preparation for punishment. Perhaps you've done the same. Perhaps you've believed that because your deepest connection hasn't fully appeared yet, something must be wrong. But what if nothing is wrong? What if growth often looks like stillness before it looks like movement? Consider the story of the bamboo tree. For years after it is planted, almost nothing seems to happen above the ground. The person watering it may wonder whether all their effort has been wasted. Friends might suggest giving up. Neighbors may assume the tree has failed to grow. Yet beneath the surface, an extraordinary network of roots is spreading in every direction. The bamboo is not inactive. It is becoming stable enough to support the remarkable height it will one day reach. Then, seemingly overnight, it rises with astonishing speed. To the outside world, the growth appears sudden. But the truth is that the visible miracle was supported by years of invisible preparation. Perhaps your own life has been unfolding exactly like that. Perhaps your roots have been growing while you've been worrying about your branches. Your patience, your compassion, your resilience, your discernment, your ability to forgive without forgetting, your willingness to love without losing yourself. None of those qualities appear overnight. They are cultivated quietly, often through seasons you would never choose for yourself. If someone had shown you your future 5 years ago, would you have recognized yourself? Probably not. You have changed in ways that are easy to overlook because you've lived through every step of the process. Think about the version of yourself who accepted crumbs instead of genuine love. The version who apologized simply to keep the peace. The version who ignored red flags because loneliness felt more frightening than disappointment. That person was doing the best they could with the awareness they had at the time. There is no need to judge them. There is only gratitude. Because without that version of you, the person you are becoming could never exist. Healing is not about rejecting your past. It is about honoring every chapter that brought you here. Even the painful ones. Especially the painful ones. Many people imagine spiritual awakening as a dramatic moment. A flash of light. A mystical vision. A life-changing revelation. Sometimes it is. But more often, it is surprisingly ordinary. It is choosing peace instead of another argument. It is walking away from someone who repeatedly dishonors your worth. It is saying no without feeling guilty. It is resting without believing you must constantly prove yourself. It is forgiving someone while also recognizing that forgiveness does not require continued access to your life. These quiet decisions reshape your destiny more than dramatic experiences ever could. Little by little, your external world begins reflecting your internal transformation. The conversations you tolerate begin changing. The opportunities you notice begin changing. Even the people who are naturally drawn toward you begin changing. Not because you've become someone else, but because you've become more fully yourself. This is one of the greatest mysteries of meaningful relationships. The healthier your relationship with yourself becomes, the healthier every future relationship has the potential to become. That includes the connection many people describe as the twin flame journey. Contrary to popular belief, such a connection is not meant to rescue you from loneliness. It is not meant to complete an incomplete person. It is not meant to erase every fear or guarantee a life without challenges. Instead, it invites two people who have each undergone profound transformation to meet from a place of greater authenticity. Not perfection. Authenticity. There is a beautiful difference. Perfection asks you to hide your scars. Authenticity allows your scars to become part of your wisdom. Perfection fears mistakes. Authenticity learns from them. Perfection demands certainty. Authenticity trusts the unfolding path. Perhaps that is why your emotional sensitivity has always mattered. Not because it made life easier, but because it prevented you from becoming emotionally asleep. Despite every disappointment, your heart kept searching for truth. Despite every betrayal, you still believed genuine love could exist. Despite every misunderstanding, you never stopped hoping someone, somewhere, might finally recognize the real you. That hope is not foolish. It is courageous. Because cynicism is easy after heartbreak. Keeping your heart open requires extraordinary strength. And maybe that strength has been quietly growing within you all along. So today, instead of asking, "When will my twin flame arrive?" try asking a different question. Who have I become because of this journey? Notice how different those questions feel. One is rooted in absence. The other is rooted in transformation. One waits for external change. The other celebrates internal growth. Ironically, it is often when that shift happens that life begins surprising you. Not because you've manipulated the universe, Not because you've finally solved every spiritual mystery, but because you've stopped measuring your worth by what has not yet happened. You've remembered that your value has never depended on another person's arrival. It has always existed within you. And from that place, everything changes. You begin living instead of waiting, creating instead of worrying, loving instead of fearing, trusting instead of controlling. Whether or not you interpret your experiences through the lens of twin flames, one truth remains universally meaningful. The deepest relationships grow strongest when they are rooted in two whole people choosing one another, rather than two wounded people hoping to heal through each other. Perhaps that has been the hidden lesson from the very beginning. Your intense emotions were never meant to imprison you. They were meant to awaken you. Your loneliness was never meant to define you. It was meant to deepen your relationship with yourself. Your disappointments were never proof that love had forgotten you. They were invitations to discover a love that begins within before it is reflected without. So if this message has found you today, maybe it is not by accident. Maybe this is your reminder to stop apologizing for feeling deeply, to stop believing your sensitivity is a flaw, to stop measuring your journey against anyone else's timeline. Your path is your own. Your healing is your own. Your story is still unfolding. And perhaps the chapter you're standing in today is not the ending you feared, but the quiet beginning you almost overlooked. If these words resonated with your heart, take a moment to acknowledge the journey you've already traveled. Comment below, "I accept my destiny." Not because those 4 words create your future, but because they remind you to consciously embrace the person you are becoming. Then share one lesson that your emotional sensitivity has taught you. Your story may become the encouragement someone else has been searching for. If this message brought you clarity, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join this growing community of souls exploring healing, self-discovery, and meaningful spiritual connection. Until we meet again, remember this: you were never too much. You were never too sensitive. You were never behind. Everything you've felt, every tear you've cried, every ending you've survived, every moment you questioned whether you belonged, has been shaping a heart capable of recognizing extraordinary love when it finally appears. Trust the timing. Trust your growth. And above all, trust the quiet wisdom your soul has been whispering to you all along. What if the greatest sign that your twin flame journey is changing? That isn't that someone new suddenly appears? What if the first miracle doesn't happen around you, but within you? For so long, you've been waiting for an external sign. A message, a phone call, a chance encounter, a dream so vivid that it finally confirms everything you've hoped to believe. But what if the universe has been sending you signs all along? Only not in the way you expected? The truth is, genuine transformation rarely announces itself with fireworks. More often, it arrives quietly. One ordinary morning, you wake up and realize you no longer feel the need to chase someone who stopped choosing you. One afternoon, you hear a song that once shattered your heart. And instead of crying, you simply smile. One evening, you remember a painful chapter of your life. Yet instead of feeling anger, you feel gratitude for what it taught you. These moments seem small, almost invisible, but spiritually speaking, they represent something extraordinary. Because healing is not measured by how intensely you once loved. It is measured by how peacefully you can remember. Think about a river after a violent storm. At first, the current is wild. Branches float past. The water is muddy. Everything feels chaotic. But eventually the storm passes. The river does not force itself to become calm. It simply allows time to do what time has always done. Little by little, the water clears. The current softens. The surface becomes still enough to reflect the sky once again. Perhaps your heart has been like that river. Not broken, simply stirred by storms. And perhaps, for the first time in years, the water is beginning to settle. One of the clearest signs of inner transformation is that your attention slowly shifts away from what you've lost and toward what you're becoming. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, what is this experience trying to teach me? That single question changes everything. Because victims search for blame. Healers search for wisdom. Notice that this doesn't mean your pain wasn't real. It doesn't mean betrayal suddenly becomes acceptable. It doesn't mean heartbreak magically disappears. It simply means your suffering no longer controls the direction of your life. That is freedom. Perhaps you've already noticed subtle changes within yourself. You no longer feel compelled to explain your worth to people determined to misunderstand you. You stop chasing conversations that have already ended. You stop trying to convince people to love you in ways they are incapable of loving. Instead, you begin honoring your own energy. That shift is profound. Because every time you choose peace over proving yourself, you reclaim a piece of your soul. Many people imagine readiness as certainty. They think they'll somehow know exactly when they've healed, exactly when they've found their purpose, exactly when they're prepared for extraordinary love. But life rarely works that way. Readiness often feels surprisingly ordinary. You still have questions. You still have moments of doubt. You still remember your scars. The difference is, those scars no longer decide your future. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase for years. At first, you barely notice its weight because you've grown accustomed to it. Then one day, someone gently points out that you've been carrying it this entire time. You set it down. For the first few moments, you almost feel lighter than gravity itself. Not because the world changed, because the burden did. Many emotional burdens work exactly the same way. The fear of abandonment, the need for constant validation, the belief that love must always hurt, the assumption that being alone means you've somehow failed. Eventually, if you're willing to examine those beliefs honestly, you discover that many of them were never yours to carry. Perhaps they belonged to childhood. Perhaps they belonged to previous relationships. Perhaps they belonged to expectations placed upon you by people who were struggling with their own unhealed pain. Whatever their origin, you now have a choice. Continue carrying them, or gently place them down. Healing begins with permission. Permission to become someone new. One fascinating truth about human growth is that the people around you often notice your transformation before you do. Friends begin saying, "You seem different. You seem calmer. You don't react the way you used to." Sometimes they mean it as a compliment. Sometimes they don't. Growth has a curious way of making some people comfortable, and others uncomfortable. Why? Because your transformation quietly invites them to examine their own lives. Not everyone is ready for that invitation. Some people preferred the version of you who constantly doubted yourself. The version who always said yes. The version who accepted less than you deserved. As you grow, some relationships naturally drift away. Not because anyone is necessarily wrong, but because your inner landscape has changed. And different landscapes support different kinds of life. Imagine climbing a mountain. At the base, thousands of people surround you. The higher you climb, the fewer companions remain. Not because the journey has become lonely, because the path has become more specific. Eventually, you meet people walking in the same direction. Not by chasing them, but because your paths naturally intersect. Perhaps meaningful relationships emerge the same way. Not through force, not through desperation, but through alignment. This is one reason many spiritual teachers emphasize becoming rather than searching. The more deeply you embody honesty, the more naturally honest people recognize you, the more fully you embrace peace. The less attractive chaos becomes. The more you respect yourself, the less willing you become to accept relationships built upon inconsistency or manipulation. Whether or not you describe this process as preparing for a twin flame, the principle remains the same. Inner transformation reshapes outer experience. Now think back to the person you were when this journey first began. Perhaps you believed happiness depended upon someone finally choosing you. Today, maybe you're beginning to understand something much deeper. You were never waiting for another person to complete your life. You were waiting to remember your own completeness. That realization changes how love is experienced. Love is no longer rescue. It becomes recognition. Not recognition that someone else will save you. Recognition that another soul sees the truth you finally learned to see within yourself. This kind of connection cannot be manufactured. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be rushed. It grows naturally from authenticity, like two stars that have always existed within the same sky. Eventually, their light reaches one another, not because either one forced the meeting, but because light always travels toward connection. Perhaps your life has been teaching that lesson all along. Perhaps every delay encouraged patience. Every disappointment strengthened discernment. Every lonely season deepened compassion. Every unanswered prayer quietly redirected you toward something your smaller plans could never have imagined. And perhaps, the greatest miracle was never meeting another soul. Perhaps the greatest miracle has been rediscovering your own. Because once you truly know yourself, you stop abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. You stop shrinking your light to avoid making others uncomfortable. You stop apologizing for your sensitivity. You realize that the very qualities you once tried to hide are the qualities that make your presence unforgettable. Your kindness, your intuition, your compassion, your ability to see beauty where others see ordinary life. Your willingness to love even after disappointment. These are not flaws. They are evidence of a heart that has remained open despite every reason to close. That is rare. And rare things should never apologize for existing. So as this journey comes to a close, take one final moment to reflect. Not on the person you're waiting to meet. Reflect on the person you've already become. Look at how many storms you've survived. Look at how many times life asked you to begin again. Look at every moment you believed you couldn't continue, yet somehow did. You are living proof that the human spirit can bend without breaking. You are evidence that healing is possible. You are a reminder that sensitivity is not the opposite of strength. Often, it is strength in its purest form. If this message has spoken to your heart, let today become more than another video you've watched. Let it become a promise you make to yourself. A promise to trust your own journey. A promise to honor your emotions without allowing them to control you. A promise to welcome love without abandoning yourself. And a promise to believe that whatever is truly meant for your life will never require you to betray your deepest values to receive it. If you're ready to embrace that commitment, write these simple words in the comments. I accept my destiny. Not because typing those words changes your future overnight, but because sometimes a simple declaration reminds your own heart of what it has known all along. If this message encouraged you, share it with someone who has always felt too sensitive for this world. They may discover, perhaps for the very first time, that their greatest perceived weakness has always been one of their greatest gifts. And if you'd like to continue exploring topics of spiritual awakening, emotional healing, twin flame journeys, and the deeper wisdom hidden within life's most difficult seasons, be sure to subscribe and join this community. Remember this above all else. You were never late. You were never forgotten. You were never too emotional. Every tear you've shed, every lesson you've learned, every ending you've endured, has quietly shaped the extraordinary person you are today. The path ahead may still hold mysteries, but you no longer have to fear them. Because the greatest journey was never about finding your way to another soul. It was about finding your way home to your own. And once you have done that, whatever is truly meant to walk beside you will recognize the light you've finally allowed yourself to shine. There comes a moment on every deeply transformative journey when nothing dramatic happens anymore. No more emotional storms. No more sudden breakdowns. No more intense waves of longing that shake your entire inner world. Instead, something much quieter arrives. At first, you might not even notice it, because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't feel like destiny. It feels like calm. And for someone who has spent years living inside emotional intensity, that calm can feel almost unfamiliar, even suspicious. You might catch yourself wondering, why does everything feel so still? Why am I not reacting like I used to? Why does the past no longer hurt the same way? But what you're experiencing is not emptiness. It is integration. It is the moment your nervous system stops living in survival mode and begins remembering what peace feels like. And this is where the story quietly changes direction. Because what you once thought was the destination was never meant to arrive through chaos. It was always meant to arrive through clarity. There is a strange truth many people discover only after they stop chasing. The things they were desperately trying to manifest begin to approach them on their own. Not because the universe suddenly changed, but because they did. You stop overthinking every silence. You stop analyzing every delay. You stop interpreting every absence as rejection. And something within you softens. Not into weakness, but into receptivity. Because chasing creates tension. And tension repels what is naturally meant to flow toward you. But stillness creates space. And space allows arrival. Think about a lake early in the morning. When the water is disturbed, it reflects nothing clearly. Everything becomes distorted, unrecognizable, confusing. But when the surface becomes still, the entire sky can be seen within it. Not because the sky moved closer, but because the water finally became still enough to reflect it. This is what emotional healing actually does. It does not bring you something new from outside. It restores your ability to see what has always been present, including yourself, including love, including possibility, including connection. And then it happens, not as a dramatic entrance, not as a cinematic reunion, but as something far more subtle. Un message arrive. A name appears again. A memory resurfaces without pain. A person you had emotionally detached from suddenly crosses your thoughts. But this time without pulling you backward. Or perhaps, someone new enters your life. And nothing about it feels overwhelming. There is no obsession, no urgency, no desperate need to define everything immediately. Just a quiet sense of familiarity. Like something inside you recognizes something outside you, without needing explanation. And this is where many people become confused, because they expect destiny to feel like chaos. But true alignment rarely feels chaotic. It feels simple, almost too simple for the mind that has survived emotional intensity. You might notice something even more surprising. You no longer lose yourself in connection. You remain present. You remain grounded. You remain aware of your own boundaries without fear. And instead of asking, will they stay? You begin asking something entirely different. Does this feel aligned with who I am becoming? That question changes everything, because it shifts you from attachment to awareness, from fear to choice, from emotional survival to conscious participation in your own life. And somewhere in this quiet transformation, you realize something profound. You are no longer the person who began this journey. The version of you who once overanalyzed every silence is gone. The version of you who waited anxiously for signs has softened. The version of you who believed love had to hurt to be real has dissolved. And in their place is someone new, someone steadier, someone quieter inside, someone who no longer confuses intensity with truth. This is often the point where people say, I feel like I've changed, but I don't know when it happened. And that is exactly how real transformation works. It does not arrive as one moment. It arrives as 1,000 invisible decisions. Choosing peace instead of reaction. Choosing self-respect instead of attachment. Choosing honesty instead of self-abandonment. Choosing rest instead of emotional exhaustion. Choosing yourself again and again until it becomes natural. And one day, without realizing it, you are no longer chasing love. You are living from it. And then comes the most unexpected shift of all. The idea of the one begins to feel different. Not smaller, not less meaningful, but less desperate, less distant, less like something that must rescue you from your life. Instead, it becomes something far more grounded. A meeting of two people who have both learned how to hold themselves. Not two halves searching for completion, but two whole individuals recognizing resonance. And in that recognition, there is no chaos. There is no loss of self. There is no emotional dependency disguised as love. There is simply presence. You begin to understand something that no emotional storm ever taught you clearly. Love was never meant to erase you. It was meant to reveal you. And anything that required you to disappear in order to be loved was never aligned with your truth. This is why the quiet arrival feels so different. It does not overwhelm your nervous system. It does not destabilize your identity. It does not pull you into obsession or confusion. Instead, it supports your growth. It respects your boundaries. It honors your peace. And most importantly, it does not require you to abandon yourself. And maybe for the first time, you are able to see your past differently. Not as a series of mistakes. Not as evidence of being unlucky in love. Not as proof that something was wrong with you. But as preparation. Every ending that once felt like loss was refining your ability to recognize alignment. Every heartbreak that once felt unbearable was teaching your heart how to remain open without becoming fragile. Every silence that once felt like abandonment was training you to hear your own voice more clearly. And now, standing in this quieter version of your life, you realize something almost unbelievable. Nothing was ever wasted. Not your sensitivity. Not your confusion. Not your longing. Not even your pain. All of it was shaping your awareness. All of it was refining your perception. All of it was guiding you back to yourself. Because only someone who has truly met themselves can recognize what is real when it finally appears. And so, if something new is entering your life now, you are not the same person who would have chased it in the past. You are not the same person who would have clung to it out of fear. You are not the same person who would have confused intensity with destiny. You are someone else entirely. Someone who can pause. Someone who can feel. Someone who can choose. Someone who can stay grounded while still remaining open. And that changes everything. Because what you were waiting for was never just a person. It was a version of you who could meet that person without losing yourself. And now, you are becoming that version. Quietly. Naturally. Without force. Without urgency. Without fear. So if love is arriving, it will not feel like rescue. It will feel like recognition. If connection is arriving, it will not feel like confusion. It will feel like clarity. If destiny is arriving, it will not feel like chaos. It will feel like peace you didn't know you had been missing. And maybe the most beautiful truth of all is this. You are no longer waiting for your life to begin. You're already inside it. Fully present. Fully aware. Fully becoming. And whatever is meant for you will not need you to chase it. It will recognize the space you have finally created within yourself. And simply find its way home. There is a moment at the end of every long emotional journey when you look back and no longer recognize the person who began it. Not because that version of you was wrong. Not because they were weak. But because they were still inside the questions, while you are now beginning to understand the answers. And strangely enough, the answers do not arrive like thunder. They do not shake the ground beneath your feet. They do not rewrite your life in a single dramatic instant. Instead, they arrive quietly, like morning light slowly filling a room you didn't realize had been dark. At first, you may not even realize something has changed. You wake up and notice the absence of urgency. You check your phone and feel no emotional spike. You think about certain people from your past, and nothing pulls you backward. No pain, No obsession. No longing that once felt unbearable. Just memory. Neutral. Soft. Far away. And that is when the realization begins to form. Something inside you has finally settled. For so long, your life may have felt like a question with no final answer. Why did I feel everything so intensely? Why did I lose people I cared about? Why did nothing stay the way I thought it would? Why did love feel so close yet so unreachable? Why did I always feel like I was being prepared for something I could never see? But now, those questions no longer demand urgency. They no longer feel like wounds. They begin to feel like chapters. Closed chapters. And this is where true integration begins. Not when life becomes perfect. Not when every desire is fulfilled. But when your nervous system finally stops interpreting your past as danger. When your heart no longer confuses memory with threat. When your emotions no longer pull you backward every time something familiar appears. This is not emotional numbness. This is emotional clarity. Think of a long road you once walked in heavy fog. At times, you could only see a few steps ahead. You guessed your direction. You hesitated. You doubted. You turned back more than once. You questioned whether the path even existed. But now, the fog is lifted. And when you look behind you, the entire road becomes visible. Every turn makes sense. Every detour reveals purpose. Even the moments you once called mistakes now look like necessary adjustments. Not because the road changed, but because your visibility did. This is how healing often reveals itself in hindsight. You don't always notice it happening in real time. Because transformation is quiet when it is real. It does not interrupt your life. It rewrites it slowly. So slowly that you only recognize it when comparison becomes impossible. The old version of you would have reacted differently. The old version of you would have stayed longer. The old version of you would have suffered more. But you didn't. And that difference is everything. At some point, you begin to realize something unexpected. You are no longer trying to become someone new. You are simply no longer abandoning who you already are. And that changes the entire structure of your emotional world. Because suffering is not only created by pain, it is also created by resistance to oneself. When you stop resisting your emotions, they begin to move. When you stop resisting your past, it begins to release. When you stop resisting your own sensitivity, it becomes wisdom instead of overwhelm. And perhaps the most profound realization of all is this. Nothing that was meant for you was ever truly lost. It may have left your life. It may have changed form. It may have arrived later than expected. But it was never erased from your path. Because what is aligned with your growth will always find its way back into your awareness in some form. Sometimes as a person. Sometimes as clarity. Sometimes as peace. Sometimes as self-respect. Sometimes as the simple ability to say, I understand now. And that understanding is not intellectual. It is embodied. You feel it in your breath, in your reactions, in your boundaries, in your silence, in the way you no longer chase closure from people who cannot give it, in the way you no longer seek validation from those who never saw you clearly, in the way you no longer confuse absence with worth. This is what it means when everything finally makes sense. Not that every question is answered perfectly, but that every question loses its emotional control over you. You can remember without reopening wounds. You can reflect without falling apart. You can revisit the past without becoming it again. That is freedom. And then something even deeper begins to emerge. A quiet certainty. Not loud. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just steady. You begin to trust yourself in a way you never did before. Not because life has become predictable, but because you have become grounded enough to hold unpredictability. You no longer need guarantees to move forward. You no longer need certainty to feel safe. You no longer need to know every outcome before taking a step. You begin to understand that trust was never about control. It was about self-anchoring. And in this state, something beautiful happens to your relationships. You stop projecting old wounds onto new connections. You stop expecting people to repeat patterns from your past. You stop entering love from a place of fear. And instead, you begin entering it from presence. You listen more clearly. You observe more honestly. You choose more wisely. Not from caution, but from awareness. And perhaps, without even noticing it, your entire definition of love begins to shift. Love is no longer something that consumes you. It is something that supports you. Love is no longer something you chase. It is something you recognize. Love is no longer something that completes you. It is something that meets you, exactly as you are. And this is where the journey reveals its deepest truth. The emotional intensity you once struggled to understand was never a sign that something was wrong with you. It was a sign that your inner world was never meant to stay small. You were not built to feel superficially. You were built to feel deeply, fully, and honestly. And that depth, once stabilized by healing, becomes perception, becomes intuition, becomes wisdom. So when you look back now, you no longer ask, "Why did I go through all of that?" Instead, a different question appears. One that feels softer, more grounded, more real. Who have I become because I survived it? And in that question, there is no pain, only recognition. Because you are no longer at the beginning of the story. You are no longer inside the fog. You are no longer waiting for signs to tell you what your life means. You can see it now. Even if not perfectly. Even if not completely. Even if life is still unfolding. You can see enough. And that is what makes everything finally make sense. Not answers from outside, but clarity from within. And as this journey closes, there is nothing left to chase. Nothing left to prove. Nothing left to fix in the version of you that once struggled to understand it all. Only one thing remains. Presence. The simple, quiet awareness that you are here now. Not broken. Not waiting. Not behind. But becoming. And already in many ways, arrived. There comes a final realization at the end of every deep emotional awakening. And it is not dramatic. It does not arrive with overwhelming emotion. It does not feel like a breakthrough. It feels more like silence. A silence so complete that it no longer carries confusion inside it. And in that silence, you finally understand something that no one was able to explain to you before. You were never too much. Not too emotional. Not too sensitive. Not too intense. Not too complicated. You were simply uncontained. And for most of your life, you were trying to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold the fullness of who you are. For a long time, you may have believed your emotions were the problem. You may have tried to shrink yourself, to soften your reactions, to silence your intuition, to become easier for others to understand. You learned how to read the room before speaking. You learned how to hide what you felt so others would not feel uncomfortable. You learned how to smile when your heart was breaking. And slowly, you began to disappear inside yourself. Not physically, but emotionally. But something within you never fully gave up. Even when you tried to silence it, it remained alive. That deep sensitivity, that awareness of subtle emotional shifts, that ability to feel what others were unwilling to say. That quiet inner voice that kept telling you, this is not all there is. And that is where your true journey began. Not when you met someone, not when you lost someone, but when you stopped fully abandoning yourself just to belong. Because the moment you begin abandoning yourself for acceptance, you begin disconnecting from your truth. And yet, despite everything, you never completely lost that truth. Even in your lowest moments, something inside you remained aware. Something inside you kept observing. Something inside you kept searching. Not for love from others, but for alignment within yourself. And now looking back, you begin to see it clearly. Every experience that once felt like rejection was actually redirection. Every relationship that could not hold your depth was revealing the importance of finding something deeper. Every moment you were misunderstood was teaching you how precious real understanding truly is. Every time you were called too sensitive was actually pointing toward a gift that the world rarely knows how to name. Because sensitivity, when unhealed, feels like overwhelm. But sensitivity, when integrated, becomes perception. It becomes intuition. It becomes emotional intelligence. It becomes the ability to see truth beneath surface appearances. It becomes the capacity to love without losing yourself. It becomes clarity where others see confusion. And that is why your path was never meant to be easy. Because depth cannot be developed through avoidance. It is developed through experience, through feeling, through loss, through reflection, through return. Return not to others, but to yourself. There is a point in every deeply sensitive person's life where they begin to ask, why do I feel everything so intensely? But the answer was never that something was wrong with you. The answer was that nothing in you was ever designed to be shallow. You were not built for surface-level living. You were built for depth. And depth always comes with complexity, but also with truth. And now something shifts. You no longer see your sensitivity as something to fix. You no longer see your emotions as enemies. You no longer see your intensity as instability. Instead, you begin to recognize something far more profound. Your emotions were never against you. They were guiding you, even when it felt overwhelming, even when it felt confusing, even when it felt like too much to carry. They were always pointing you back to truth, back to alignment, back to yourself. And suddenly, everything you once struggled with becomes something you understand differently. The loneliness, the overthinking, the emotional depth, the sensitivity to energy, the longing for something real. None of it was random. None of it was accidental. None of it was meaningless. It was all part of a larger unfolding that you could not see at the time. Because growth is rarely recognizable while it is happening. It only becomes visible in reflection. Like looking at a forest from above after walking through it for years on the ground. What once felt like chaos reveals itself as pattern. What once felt like loss reveals itself as shaping. What once felt like confusion reveals itself as preparation. And now the most important shift begins to take place. You no longer seek someone to validate your existence. You no longer need someone to confirm your worth. You no longer measure your value through emotional response from others. Instead, you begin to stand inside your own presence. And that presence becomes enough. This is not isolation. This is integration. Because isolation says, I am alone and disconnected. But integration says, I am whole even when I am alone. That difference changes everything. And from this place of wholeness, your relationships begin to transform naturally. You no longer chase emotional inconsistency. You no longer confuse unpredictability with depth. You no longer tolerate relationships that require you to shrink yourself. You begin choosing differently. Not from fear, but from awareness. Not from need, but from clarity. Not from longing, but from alignment. And something remarkable happens when you reach this stage. Love no longer feels like something you must earn. It feels like something you can recognize. And more importantly, something you can receive without losing yourself. Because now, you are no longer looking for someone to complete you. You are looking for resonance. Not dependency. Not rescue. Not escape. But resonance. A meeting of two whole selves who do not require each other to survive, but choose each other in presence. And in that understanding, so much of your past begins to soften. Not because it was easy, but because you finally understand what it was doing. Every heartbreak was refining your discernment. Every silence was strengthening your intuition. Every emotional storm was expanding your capacity to hold complexity without collapse. Every moment you thought you were breaking was actually a moment you were becoming more capable of holding yourself. And now, you can finally say it without resistance. You were never too much. You were never too sensitive. You were never too emotional. You were never too intense. You were simply becoming aware in a world that often asks people to be less aware in order to feel comfortable. But your path was never meant for comfort alone. It was meant for truth. And truth, once integrated, no longer needs defense. It simply exists. Quietly. Steadily. Within you. So as this journey reaches its final moment, there is nothing left to fix. Nothing left to chase. Nothing left to prove. Only something to recognize. That everything you once thought was breaking you was actually shaping you into someone who could finally meet life without abandoning themselves. And that person is who you have become. Not suddenly, not perfectly, but undeniably. And perhaps the most beautiful realization of all is this. You were not waiting for life to begin. You were learning how to arrive inside your own life. Fully, gently, completely. And now that you are here, there is nothing in you that needs to be less in order to be loved. Because the version of you reading this is already whole. There is a final stage in every deep inner journey. And it is not discovery. It is return. Not a return to who you were before everything happened, but a return to who you were always becoming beneath everything that happened. And strangely enough, it does not feel like arrival. It feels like familiarity. Like stepping into a room you didn't realize you had been building your entire life. At first, it might not look like anything special has changed. Your external life may still have unanswered questions. There may still be uncertainty. There may still be people who have not returned. There may still be dreams unfolding slowly. And yet, something fundamental inside you is no longer searching in the same way. You are no longer running toward yourself, because you have already begun to meet yourself where you are. For so long, your life may have been defined by waiting. Waiting for clarity. Waiting for love. Waiting for confirmation. Waiting for the moment everything finally made sense. But now, the waiting begins to dissolve. Not because everything has been solved, but because your need for everything to be solved has softened. You no longer demand certainty before you can breathe. You no longer require guarantees before you can feel peace. You no longer postpone your life until everything aligns perfectly. Instead, you begin living inside what is already here. And this is where the real shift happens. Because the deepest transformation was never about what you would receive. It was about what you would stop abandoning. You stop abandoning your intuition. You stop abandoning your emotions. You stop abandoning your boundaries. You stop abandoning your voice. And slowly, you stop abandoning yourself in order to keep connection alive. There is a quiet kind of strength that emerges from this stage. It does not announce itself. It does not seek validation. It does not need to be seen. But it changes everything. Because when you are no longer willing to leave yourself, you stop entering situations that require self-abandonment. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop shrinking to maintain connection. And without effort, your entire relational world begins to reorganize. Some people may not understand this version of you. Some may even say you have changed. And they are right, but not in the way they think. You have not become colder. You have become clearer. You have not become distant. You have become discernible. You have not become less loving. You have become less willing to confuse love with sacrifice of self. And from this clarity, a new kind of emotional stability begins to emerge. Not because life has become easier, but because you are no longer emotionally governed by instability. You can feel deeply, without drowning. You can care deeply, without losing yourself. You can love deeply, without abandoning your center. And that changes the entire architecture of your inner world. There was a time when intensity felt like truth, when emotional highs and lows felt like proof of connection, when uncertainty felt like destiny, when distance felt like meaning. But now, you begin to recognize something far more grounded. Truth does not need chaos to exist. Real connection does not require emotional suffering to validate itself. And love does not need confusion to feel real. Instead, what begins to feel real is something far quieter. Consistency, presence, respect, clarity, peace that does not disappear the moment you become yourself. And for the first time, you do not mistake calm for absence. You recognize it as safety. And then something profound happens. You stop trying to decode life. You stop analyzing every silence. You stop searching for hidden meanings in every delay. You begin to let life be what it is, without forcing it to explain itself at every moment. And in that letting go, something unexpected appears. Space. Space to breathe. Space to feel. Space to exist without constant interpretation. This is where the return begins. Not as a dramatic homecoming, but as a gradual recognition that you are already where you were trying to arrive. The destination was never somewhere else. It was always here, inside the version of you that no longer needs to escape the present moment. And as this realization deepens, your past begins to lose its emotional weight. Not because it becomes irrelevant, but because it no longer defines your identity. You can look back without collapsing into memory. You can remember without reopening wounds. You can acknowledge what happened without becoming who you were in it. And slowly, a deeper truth emerges. You were never being taken away from yourself. You were being guided back to yourself through experience. Every loss redirected you inward. Every confusion forced you to listen more closely. Every disappointment stripped away illusions you once mistook for truth. Until what remained was something simpler, something unbreakable, something real. You. And now, in this state of return, you begin to notice how differently you relate to life itself. You are no longer waiting for a future version of yourself to begin living. You are no longer postponing joy until everything is perfect. You are no longer holding your breath until certainty arrives. You are here. And that is enough. Even love begins to feel different in this space. Not as a missing piece, but as an experience that complements wholeness rather than completes absence. You no longer look at connection as rescue. You look at it as reflection. You no longer seek someone to fill your emptiness. You seek someone who can meet your fullness. And that shift is everything. Because now, you are no longer choosing from loneliness. You are choosing from presence. Not from fear of being alone, but from awareness of your own company. And from that place, every choice becomes clearer. Every boundary becomes easier. Every connection becomes more intentional. There is a kind of peace that only arrives after you stop fighting yourself. After you stop negotiating your worth. After you stop trying to become acceptable at the cost of authenticity. It does not feel like excitement. It feels like relief. Deep, quiet, steady relief. The kind that does not disappear when life becomes uncertain. And in that relief, something powerful takes root. Trust. Not blind trust in outcomes, but grounded trust in your ability to navigate whatever outcomes arise. You begin to trust yourself more than you trust predictions. You begin to trust your feelings more than external validation. You begin to trust your timing more than urgency. And that trust becomes your foundation. This is the final evolution of everything you have been through. Not the arrival of someone else, but the arrival of yourself. Fully, consciously, without fragmentation, without apology, without fear of your own depth. And maybe now you can finally see it. All the chapters that once felt like confusion were actually leading you here. Not to a perfect life, but to a true one. A life where you no longer need to leave yourself in order to belong. A life where you no longer confuse intensity with destiny. A life where you no longer abandon peace to chase meaning. Because meaning is no longer outside you. It is how you now live. And as this final chapter closes, there is nothing left to become. Only something to recognize. That the journey was never about reaching someone else. It was always about returning to the only place you were ever meant to arrive. Yourself. And now that you are here, there is nothing in you that is missing. Only life. Finally being lived from within. There is a moment after every awakening, when the story no longer feels like a journey. Not because the path has ended, but because you are no longer walking it as someone trying to become whole. You are walking it as someone who already remembers that they are. And that changes everything. At first, this new state may feel strangely ordinary. There are no more emotional extremes pulling you apart. No more urgent searching for meaning in every sign. No more collapsing into questions that have no immediate answers. Instead, there is presence. Simple, unshakable, almost unremarkable in its quietness. And yet, beneath that simplicity, everything has changed. You begin to notice it in the smallest moments. The way you wake up without emotional weight pressing on your chest. The way silence no longer feels empty, but spacious. The way you no longer rush to fill every gap with meaning, explanation, or expectation. You begin to sit with life as it is, without immediately trying to turn it into something else. And that alone is a form of freedom most people never realize they are missing. For so long, your nervous system may have been conditioned to interpret stillness as uncertainty, to interpret distance as abandonment, to interpret delay as rejection, to interpret emotional intensity as truth. But now, those interpretations begin to dissolve. Not because you force them away, but because you no longer need them to survive emotionally. And without needing them, they lose their power. There is a subtle but profound shift that happens here. You stop living inside reaction, and begin living inside observation. You no longer become your emotions. You witness them. You no longer merge with every thought that passes through you. You see them as movement. And in that space between feeling and identity, a new kind of intelligence awakens. A calm intelligence. A grounded awareness. A presence that does not rush to define everything. This is often where people mistakenly think they have lost interest in life. But in truth, they have lost attachment to illusion. And what remains is not emptiness. It is clarity. Because when emotional chaos no longer dominates your perception, what you actually see becomes more honest, more precise, more real. And in this clarity, your relationships transform naturally. Not through effort, not through strategy, but through resonance. You no longer feel drawn to what destabilizes you. You no longer confuse emotional turbulence with depth. You no longer stay in places where you must constantly shrink to be accepted. Instead, you begin choosing environments that reflect your inner stability. And something surprising happens. You stop needing people to understand your entire story. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop performing emotional labor just to maintain connection. And instead, you begin allowing people to meet you where they are capable of meeting you. Not from resentment, but from awareness. Because you finally understand. Not every connection is meant to go deep. And not every depth is meant to be shared everywhere. There is also a shift in how you experience love itself. Love is no longer a search. No longer a pursuit. No longer a rescue fantasy. It becomes something quieter. Something more grounded. Something that does not require emotional suffering to validate its existence. You begin to recognize love in consistency, in presence, in honesty without confusion, in actions that align with words over time. And you begin to feel something unfamiliar. Safety. Not the kind of safety that depends on controlling outcomes, but the kind that arises when you trust yourself enough to remain steady regardless of outcomes. This is where emotional maturity becomes visible. Not in perfection, but in regulation. Not in avoidance of pain, but in the ability to remain whole inside it. You can feel sadness without becoming it. You can feel longing without being consumed by it. You can feel love without losing your center. And that changes your entire experience of being alive. At some point, you may look back at your earlier self and feel a deep sense of compassion. Not superiority, not distance, but understanding. That version of you who overthought everything, who chased signs, who waited anxiously for confirmation, was not broken. They were simply navigating life with the tools they had at the time. And those tools were never meant to be permanent. They were meant to guide you until something better emerged within you. And now it has. There is also a deeper realization that begins to settle in. Nothing that was meant for you ever required you to abandon yourself to receive it. Not love, not belonging, not purpose, not connection. Anything that demanded self-erasure was never aligned with your truth. And once you fully accept that, your standards quietly rise. Not from ego, but from self-respect. And strangely enough, this does not push life away. It refines it. People who cannot meet your clarity naturally fall away. Situations that rely on emotional confusion lose their grip. Opportunities that require self-betrayal stop appealing to you. And what remains is alignment. Simple, quiet, unforced. This is where many people discover something unexpected. The life they once chased begins to reorganize itself without effort. Not because they are controlling outcomes, but because they are no longer interfering with their own clarity. They are no longer choosing from fear. They are no longer reacting from old wounds. They are no longer negotiating their worth. They are simply being. And from that state, life responds differently. There is a moment in this stage where you realize you are no longer waiting to become someone worthy of love. You're already living as someone who understands what love actually is. And that understanding removes so much confusion from your past. Because what once felt like loss was often protection. What once felt like rejection was often redirection. What once felt like delay was often alignment unfolding in a timing your fear could not yet understand. And now, perhaps the most important truth of all begins to feel obvious. You were never lost. You were never behind. You were never incomplete. You were simply becoming aware of yourself through experience. And awareness takes time. Not because you are far from truth, but because truth is revealed in layers. So when you look at your life now, you no longer see chaos. You see movement. You see evolution. You see a pattern that only becomes visible when you stop resisting it. And in that recognition, something within you settles completely. There is no longer a need for the story to continue in a dramatic way. No need for intensity. No need for struggle to validate meaning. Because meaning is no longer something you are trying to find. It is something you are living. And maybe this is the final realization. The journey was never about becoming someone else. It was about remembering the version of you that was never lost. Only buried beneath fear, conditioning, and emotional survival. And now that memory has returned. Not as an idea, but as lived experience. You are not searching anymore. You are not chasing anymore. You are not waiting anymore. You are here. Fully. Quietly. Consciously. And that is the end of the story. Not because life stops unfolding, but because you are finally present enough to live it without abandoning yourself inside it. And in that presence, everything you were ever looking for finally becomes something you are able to recognize within your own being.